Hi, my name's Chris Cannons and welcome to OCar. Today I'm going to be doing a review on my C55 AMG. So obviously this is my car and I bought it because I like Mercedes and I like big V8 Mercedes. So obviously I'm a little bit biased in that I'm going to like this car. However, I have had 2 years to find out all of the things that suck about it. So stick around and find out what those things are if you are actually considering buying one of these. So, in terms of the drivetrain, because that's obviously the centerpiece of this car, it's a 5.4 litre V8. It's the M113 V8 from Mercedes. This was in many cars in many different forms. This is the largest displacement it got, but there was actually a supercharged version. However, this has higher compression ratio, which means it makes 270 kilowatts and 511 newton meters of torque, which is quite significant for the time from a 5.4 naturally aspirated V8. It makes a fantastic German V8 sound, that sort of, it's still a cross plane crank, so it's got a bit of a rumble to it, but it can rev a little bit higher than maybe the push rod American stuff, which is that really wet, dirty sound, but it definitely doesn't have the kind of Italian scream of a Ferrari V8. I really like it. It's a very angry sound. It's not quite as angry as the M156 engines got with the C63 and E63 of the next generation, but yeah, I still think it's a really nice sounding engine, particularly with the resonator delete that I've done. It really has woken the exhaust up, and I just think it sounds fantastic. It's bloody quick as well. I did 5.4 to 100 in it the other day when I was testing it, and you're probably gonna get closer to 5 if you were on, an actual prep surface rather than like cold road tires. So it's plenty quick, and the transmission is actually pretty decent. It's a 5-speed automatic. It's not fantastic, it's not a dual clutch transmission, but it's a pretty good, traditional automatic. When you shift the gears, it doesn't really disappoint. Now, the nice thing about the automatic in this car is that it's the 722.6, I think it is, which is the same transmission that was in a lot of much higher powered cars like the SL55 AMG and stuff. So it's designed to be able to handle a lot more power than this reliably. So I'm sort of comfortable in knowing that I can drive this quite hard because it's actually built to deal with a lot more power than this car is ever going to make. It's just nice knowing that the transmission is not going to be the weak point. Now, in terms of the driving dynamics, I've obviously had a series of C-Class before this, so I had a C180 compressor, and that was the bog standard suspension, and that was quite wallowy in the corners, and it was just a general kind of base luxury car ride and performance kind of characteristics. The balance wasn't terrible. You could have a bit of fun with it, but it also wasn't, super exciting. I then had a C320, and the C320 actually had an AMG suspension pack on it, which who knows what that actually means, but I found the ride to be just a bit more compliant, and I really enjoyed the suspension in that car. I felt like the dynamics were a really big step up, but the dynamics in this are a significant step up from there. The only thing is that with the excellent chassis tuning and suspension tuning they've done, which was quite significant on the C55 over even the C32, I believe, there is the downside of they've done the German thing of just making the ride way harsher than it needs to be. And I know that the excuse always is, well, the Germans don't have bumps in the roads, so how are they supposed to know? Drive the car somewhere else. Take the car to another country, drive it, and go, oh my God, this is horrendous. Now, it's not as bad as some cars I've driven, like my old Golf GTI, which had really cheap coilovers in it. Definitely much worse. The Fiat 500 Abarth that I drove was just unacceptable, whereas this is sort of too hard, but tolerable. It's just harder than it needs to be, and that I don't need that. I don't understand why it's tuned in a way where it's harder than it needs to be. There's just no point in doing that in my mind. But they've made that decision for a reason. So the Germans know what they're doing. I'll leave them to it. But yeah, so in short, the dynamics are actually quite significantly better. I find it much easier to handle at those really high speeds, and in those sort of more tight and twisty bits, it actually has the body control to really get itself out of a sticky situation. And if you do overcook it, the tail does come around really progressively, especially since I put some Pilot Sport 5s on it. It very kind of progressively and controlledly will get a bit out of shape, and it's very easy to just correct it, slide, and sort of just, you know, glide around the corner if you do need to. It's a reasonable amount of power, so in the wet it can get hairy, and you need it to be able to be controlled quite easily in the situation that it does maybe get a bit hairy. I would never deliberately slide a car on the road. It also has some really nice features like rain sensing wipers, auto headlights, that sort of thing, because this was a very expensive car when new, so it does have a lot of those simple things, and I do like having heated seats and stuff like that, which this car does have, and memory seats and all those nice little luxuries. However, despite all the fantastic noises it makes and how fun it is to drive on the edge, there is definitely some flaws. Now, some of those flaws come with the interior quality. It's not fantastic. It's very kind of cost-cutting feeling. There's a lot of fake leathery, rubbery trim bits, which although are actually quite comfortable to sort of lean on, they're definitely that sort of sweaty, sticky rubber feel rather than a nice leather feeling. The seat material is really nice. The leather is actually quite nice, and it's heated seats with these kind of Alcantara corners, but everything else feels a bit cheap other than the sort of aluminium bits. It doesn't rattle and squeak like I've found a lot of sort of 20-year-old cars' interiors do. This car is nearly 20 years old, believe it or not. So that's a pro. The build quality is good enough that it sort of doesn't rattle and squeak too much. However, that doesn't forgive all its sins. A lot of it is really cheap. On top of that, it's a bit too quick for the road, I've found. If you set the speed limiter, which it does have, which is great if you are trying to go for a drive and would like to have a bit of fun without maybe going too much over the speed limit, it's great that it does have a speed limiter. You just go, okay, I don't want to be able to do more than 110. However, I've found you don't end up leaving second gear. Like, you don't end up leaving second gear on the road often if you're enjoying driving it and trying to drive, you know, swiftly, which is definitely unfortunate because the whole enjoyment of driving is kind of taking it to the top of each gear, and with such an aggressive first gear, it means that you're very quickly out of first and then you're very quickly speeding because it's doing 105.2 seconds. The fastest I've actually ever gotten out of it, and that was after getting it back from the rebuild just the other day, was 5.4. So, you know, on the road, you're probably going to be doing like mid fives, but yeah, it's over very quickly. And that does mean that you are really enjoying the noise and stuff, but it's a little bit too much power for the streets sometimes. Couple that with the fact that the on-center feel isn't that great. So when you're actually cornering, the steering weight's up, and I do think it has fairly good feedback. I can tell what's going on with the front tires and the rear. I sort of can feel everything because the suspension is well damped, but the actual on-center feel of the steering is just a little bit vague. There's just sort of a tiny bit of play in the middle. I don't know if that's because this car's a bit old, but I have seen a lot of period tests of this car, and from my understanding, it's never had a particularly good on-center feel, which is unfortunate because it means that if you are doing some more high-speed maneuvers, you know, on a less bendy road where you're maybe not getting into those corners as much, there's definitely that downside. All right, so onto the styling. Now the C55 does actually look significantly different to the regular C-Class of this era, which is the W203 C-Class. Here's what a regular one would look like, and then here obviously is what mine looks like. Now mine does actually have an aftermarket bumper on it. It's a imitation bumper of a CLK 63 bumper. Now, the reason that a CLK63 bumper fits this car is because the C55 actually has the front end of a CLK. So front wings, bonnet, and the bumper would be off a CLK 55 from my understanding. So that's what that looks like. As you can see, it's very similar. It also has the 18-inch AMG wheels that I believe you could actually get on maybe the C32 before this, but yeah, they were generally an AMG special wheel. You may have been able to get them if you paid a bit extra on a regular car. Also has the sporty side skirts, which are ever so slightly different to the regular C-Class models. And it comes with this little boot spoiler, which the paint has completely come off of. On mine, that needs a respray. And the very iconic quad exhaust tips of the AMG styling, which basically every AMG before or since after the merger had, which makes it very obvious that this is an AMG. So that's what I think of the C55 AMG. I've owned it for, I think it is about 2 years now, and I'm not getting rid of it anytime soon, even though it has cost me a small fortune to keep on the road. I really enjoy it. The sound is absolutely brilliant. If you enjoyed this, and if you want to see more of this build, because it will continue to be restored and modified, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you get the notifications, and maybe even consider checking out our Patreon. After this, there'll be an end card and there will be various videos for you to watch, some from the algorithm, some from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.